So this is not the video that I want to really do. It's not something that I ever imagined I would have to do. So I don't even know where to begin. So as you can tell by the title of this video, we lost our baby, and I guess I'm just going to explain what happened and kind of how I'm dealing with things. So I'll just start from the beginning. So we went in for our 21-week anatomy scan, and we were like super excited for this appointment. This was the first ultrasound appointment that Dustin was able to go to. So me, Dustin, and Isaac, we all went to this appointment together. And so I didn't really think anything was going to be wrong. I mean, I kind of had like some feelings like in the back of my mind, which I'll explain later. But anyways, we went in and wasn't really expecting anything. We were expecting to see a healthy baby and the heartbeat, and we were supposed to be finding out the gender of the baby that day. Well, we get into the ultrasound room, and as soon as the ultrasound tech started looking at the baby, I instantly knew that something was wrong. She was real quiet, and I was looking at the measurements. She was measuring the baby's head, and the baby was not measuring on time. Like when I was reading the measurements, it was saying that the baby was only measuring like 16 weeks. So I knew then that something wasn't right. She asked me if I had been feeling movements, and I had been feeling movements. I didn't notice anything like super different. With this baby from the beginning, well, not really from the beginning, but when I first started feeling movements, I never felt them like as much or as strongly as I felt them with Isaac. And so I didn't really think anything of it. And she had asked me when the last time I felt any movement was. And so I told her that I wasn't exactly sure because I never really felt the baby move a whole lot. And I thought that it might have just have been because just the way the baby was positioned, because I would feel movement, like, or at least I thought I was. I really like don't want to cry, but I'm probably going to. So she told me, well, she started doing some other things and like looking around, and I didn't see like the flicker of a heartbeat. And she played a recording and there was nothing. Oh, I'm sorry. And so she told me that there was no heartbeat. And she was like, well, let me go get your doctor. So she left the room. And I was kind of just laying there. I wasn't crying at the time when she was like looking at the ultrasound. But as soon as she left the room, I lost it. So my doctor comes into the room, and they start going over the ultrasound again. And my doctor said that she didn't know what had caused it. When I went to my 17-week appointment, there was a healthy heartbeat. Everything looked good. There was like, it was a perfectly healthy baby. And then she just said, she didn't know what happened. She said they don't understand why sometimes that happens. Like, sometime between my last appointment and then my appointment that day, that something had happened and the baby had stopped growing. But like I said, at 17 weeks there was a healthy heartbeat, and sometime after that it happened, and I had no idea. The only symptom that I had that would have suggested that something was wrong was the fact that I didn't feel baby move all that often. But I didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe my placenta was positioned in the front, and so the movements just weren't strong enough for me to feel yet. And like sometimes when I would move around, I would feel like baby roll. So I had no idea. And I think I kind of saw it coming though, because I told Dustin the night before the appointment that I felt like something might be wrong because I didn't feel this baby move like I felt Isaac move. But I tried to just like not think about it. And I had only been feeling this way for about a week or so. So it wasn't like I'd been feeling like this since my last appointment. It was like just within that week, as we were leading up to the appointment, I was just like, in the back of my mind, occasionally I would just like feel like something might be wrong. And apparently I was right, unfortunately. So after, well, my doctor had come in and they looked at everything. She said my placenta looked healthy, my fluid levels were great, and that there was no obvious indicators of anything like going wrong. And my doctor said that she wanted to just send me home. She didn't want to go over anything right then and there. She said that we just needed to go home and process what had happened, and that she would call me the next day to go over what would happen next. So, so we went home. This is turning out to be harder than I thought it would. I like haven't had any issues really talking about it with people. But for some reason, this is tough. So we go home and I cried all day. I didn't really know what to think. There is nothing worse than going to an appointment and finding out that your child has died, and that there is nothing you can do about it. That was probably the longest night of my life. I didn't get any sleep. I didn't have any answers. All I knew was that my baby had died. So the next day was Thursday, and I waited for my doctor to call. And she called me that afternoon to go over what we were going to do next. She told me that I had to go in and be induced because I was 21 weeks and the baby was too big. So I did have to deliver, which I had figured. I had kind of gone online to like kind of see what other people's experiences were. So I knew that she was going to tell me I was going to have to deliver the baby. So she let me pick when to come in, and I wanted to go in the very next day. She explained to me what was going to happen. And that I could come in anytime Friday morning if I wanted to, or I could wait until Monday, but I didn't want to wait. So we went in Friday morning. We dropped Isaac off at his grandpa's house, and he stayed the night with them. And we got over to my doctor's office at around 11, and she wanted me to come in and do some blood work just to see if there was anything in my blood showing what might have happened. When she got my results, she didn't see anything like abnormal. So she wanted to examine me. She checked my cervix, and she said I was about a fingertip dilated, and my cervix was really soft, which I think that my body was starting to go into, I guess, labor. I'm not exactly, I guess that's what it is. I asked her about it. She said that my body could have been starting to get ready to kind of do things naturally. And I had been feeling very crampy the night before, and I just felt like my body was just ready. So she explains to me that she thinks, this is like before baby was born, she told me that she thought that it was probably a cord accident, like baby got wrapped up in the cord, or there might have been a knot in the cord, or something to do with the umbilical cord, because the baby was perfectly healthy. All of my tests were normal. There was nothing that indicated there was anything wrong with the baby. And so she explained to me what was going to happen. She said I was going to go to labor and delivery, and they were going to give me a medication called Cytotec, I believe is what it was called. And I took that orally. I know that sometimes they'll like put it in your cervix, but they just gave it to me orally. I took one dose. They said I'd have to take a second dose in 12 hours. She also explained to me that she didn't know how long it would take to deliver baby, and that I could be there for a while. So I got the first dose of medication, I believe at like 2:30 Friday afternoon, and I started feeling like really crampy, which she said is what would happen, and basically it's just forcing my cervix to dilate, and you know, it's basically kind of the same way Pitocin works when you go to be induced, except for my body wasn't ready for this, so it was kind of forcing it, which is why she said it could take a long time. So, so they started that medication at like 2:30, and, I was, like I said, I was feeling crampy. It really just felt like bad period cramps. It wasn't anything too intense. They said I could have pain medicine if I needed it. I didn't feel like I needed it. It was pretty bearable up until about the end. Anywho, so my doctor also told me that when I went up and they started the medication that, a nurse would be talking to me. She was also a bereavement coordinator, and she was absolutely amazing. But when I first went in and they were like setting everything up, this was before I had gotten the medication. She told me that, actually, let me back up because I'm missing a chunk here. So after my doctor told me like what they were going to do with the medication, like giving it to me, and then I'd probably have to take another dose in 12 hours, she didn't think that I would deliver the baby until sometime Saturday. And she had told me on the phone that since the baby was measuring around 16 weeks, even though I'm pretty sure it happened at 18 weeks is when baby passed away, but she told me originally what would happen with baby is that they would just send the baby to pathology, and this is going to sound really awful, But what they normally do with babies that small, they just send them to pathology and they cremate them the way they do other things, I guess, that go to pathology. And at the time when she told me that, I was like kind of okay with it, just because I didn't feel like I could handle doing a funeral or anything like that. But she said that the nurse would talk to me about it. She said she believed that she had informed me incorrectly on the phone, and that since I was 21 weeks when we discovered what had happened, and I was supposed to be 21 weeks at delivery, because they apparently go based on your dates and not based on how big baby is measuring. So because my dates said I was 21 weeks, we actually had to make arrangements for the baby. So when I went up and I was talking to the nurse, she explained to me what was going to happen, and that we would have to make arrangements, and that she had knew of a funeral home that offered free services for situations like this, which is absolutely amazing. The only thing that we would have, if we buried baby, we would have to have a plot to bury baby in, and so that was one option. And then the other option was cremation, which was, she said right off the bat, was going to cost $500. But she said maybe with burial we could bury baby on top of someone else, like a loved one, like a grandparent or something. And I had suggested my sister passed away in 2006, and so she called the funeral home owner and asked about it, and he actually said that they weren't able to do that just because of like something about the vault that like adult bodies are buried in is only 12 inches below ground or something, and so they weren't able to do that. But he had offered to cover cremation for free. So that's what we decided on. So there was no financial burden. Everything was taken care of. So, back to the induction. Like I mentioned, they started the induction at 2:30 is when I was given the first dose of the medication. Like I said, it made me crampy, and we just stayed in the room and watched TV. I was allowed to eat, so Dustin had went and got his dinner. I was not allowed to eat the hospital food because they brought me like fish and who knows what else it was. So Dustin went and got Dairy Queen, and so we just hung out. And then it was about 10, it was a little after 10 o'clock that night. I had started getting like crampier. Like as the time went on throughout the day, I started getting crampier, and it was like after 10 o'clock that night, I had gotten up to use the bathroom, and I noticed that I had started bleeding. This is probably going to be TMI. The rest of this is going to be TMI, but I mean, pregnancy is not a, I don't even know, pregnancy is gross. So anyways, I got up to use the bathroom, and I noticed I had started bleeding, and my nurse had come in, and I explained to her what was happening. My stomach was feeling like very upset, like I had a stomach ache, and I had let her know that I had started bleeding, and that was probably about like 10:20ish. So I kind of just laid there, and the cramps had started getting worse, and I'm pretty sure that they were starting to turn into contractions because they were starting to get more intense. They were lasting about a minute, and then they were lasting for a minute, and then they would come back at, like, after a minute, and it was probably about 10:30 whenever these actually started. And it didn't last very long. They were painful enough to where I'd have to breathe through them, but I didn't feel like I needed, like, any pain medication. And, like, they had just started, so I figured, like, things were just really starting to get going. And, so those were going on for about 5 minutes. Dustin was asleep in the chair. We had been there all day, so he was pretty tired. And then all of a sudden, I felt this like a pop. I don't really know how to explain it. It was the weirdest feeling ever. So I kind of freaked out. I felt this, like, it was inside of me, and it just, like, plopped down. And I didn't really know what to think. It had only been, like, 5 minutes of me feeling these, like intense cramps. So I didn't think that I needed to call anybody until I felt that. And then I started kind of freaking out a little bit. I couldn't reach the call light. Dustin had the remote, or, like, the little remote thing that's, like, attached to the bed. He had it over on the table because he was watching TV, so he, like, wanted to be able to hear it or whatever. And so I couldn't reach it, so I had to wake Dustin up, and I'm like, Dustin, wake up, wake up. I said, you need to call a nurse in here. So he hit the call button, and I said I needed a nurse, and she came in. And at this point, I was still fully clothed. They gave me the option to just stay in the clothes that I came in, or I could wear the hospital gown, but I don't like the hospital gowns. So I just opted to stay in my comfy clothes. I was just wearing, like, sweatpants and a t-shirt. So, I was still in my clothes, and the nurse came in, and she was like, you're okay, you're okay. And I said, I felt a plop, there's something there, and I was afraid to move. And she was like, well, can you take your pants off? And, I was like, I don't know. And I was a nervous wreck. And so she rips my pants off, and she checks me, and the sack that the baby's in, had basically come out. She had me push a little bit, and baby was delivered in his sack. And I watched everything happen, because it was just right there. And she busted the sack open. And he was right there. She looked at him, and she was able to tell me that it was a boy. And he was wrapped up in the umbilical cord. That is what happened. She unwrapped him, and he had bruising on his chest. I'm sorry. So she unwrapped him and gave him to me. I got to hold him. And he was so small. Babies at that stage, they don't look like you would expect a baby to look like. The way my nurse describes it is they look like baby bean sprouts. So like if you were to plant him, he would grow into what you would imagine a newborn to look like. But you could still tell he was a baby. He was about 18 weeks. He had fingernails. You could see every little detail. He was perfect. So, at that point, the placenta was still inside. The nurse called the doctor. He was on call, so he had to come in. So he came in. It was probably about, I don't know, he probably got there like 20 minutes after he was delivered. And had to work on delivering the placenta. It wasn't quite ready to come out. It took about an hour and a half before the placenta was delivered, and that was the worst. It was very painful. And while that was happening, Dustin was holding the baby. So, while we were there earlier, we were able to pick out little outfits. We picked out a boy and a girl because at the time we didn't know the gender. So we got to pick out these beautiful little layettes. I guess is that what they're called? I don't know. But it was a beautiful little gown, and it came with a hat and a teddy bear and a blanket. So at some point, I don't remember what time it was, I think it was like around midnight, they took him to the nursery and they weighed him and measured him. And they dressed him and they brought him back to me in a little Moses basket. It was gorgeous. And we got to spend time with him. We were allowed as much time with him as we wanted or needed. And I just held him for a couple hours. And it was about, I guess, 2:30 in the morning, and the nurse, she came back and asked if we were ready to try and get some sleep. And me and Dustin both agreed that we were ready. And she said that they were going to take him to the morgue, and whenever we wanted him back, all we had to do was ask. But we pretty much just said our goodbyes. Then we thought we were ready. So I didn't really get much sleep that night, as you could probably imagine. And it was about the next morning. Well, before that, the doctor had come in and he told me he was going to go ahead and put in my discharge papers so that in the morning we can leave whenever we wanted. And we did have to wait a little while that morning to leave, just because we had to wait on the funeral home to fax over some papers. We had to wait on the funeral home to fax over the paper to, I had to sign it giving the rights to cremate him. And then they just A nurse came in and said I had to get the Tdap shot or something. And so they came in and gave me the shot and then released me to go home. We decided not to see baby before we left, which at the time I thought I was okay. I thought that last night was enough and that I had said goodbye, but now I kind of wish that I would have saw him one more time. So, yeah, so we left. It was about 10 o'clock, 9:30, maybe it was like 9:30, 10 o'clock when we left. And we went home. And the nurse told me that that afternoon, the funeral home was going to come pick him up. And, yeah, so we went home and we got Isaac. And, yeah. So that is what happened. And it sucks. I feel like I have made peace with what has happened. It hurts, but I know everything happens for a reason. And as painful as it might be, I know that I will get through this. I've made peace with what has happened, and I just give it to God. As far as how I'm dealing, there are good days and bad days. For the most part, I'm okay. Never in my life did I ever imagine that I would ever have to go through something like this. It is hard. But yeah, I'm now almost 2 weeks postpartum. And I will do an update on that. I feel like this video is probably long, so I might do a separate video on that and just with how everything's been going as far as recovery and like emotional and all that stuff. So I'll probably just do another video on that separately. But I just wanted to share my story because I know that there are people who go through this, and there's not a lot of information out there, or not a lot that is said. I feel like miscarriages and stillbirths are just not talked about enough, which I understand why. They're a hard thing to go through, but I don't want to hide what happened. I want him to be known, and to be able to help someone else going through the same situation. Yeah. I don't really know how to end this video. Guess I'm just gonna end it here, and I'll include some pictures and stuff at the end.